Hello everyone, you're watching the channel Stories of Our Life. Friends, make yourselves comfortable. I wish you to truly enjoy listening to this life story.
Minnie was a seemingly simple girl. She knew exactly what she wanted out of life, even at a young age. Her studies were not very good as she was not interested in it. One teacher or the other could be absent for 6 months at a time. She received incomplete secondary education and then decided to go to college. She did not choose an institution in the neighboring town where all the girls in her class went, but in the provincial center itself. Why would she go from one village to another? That would be unpromising. Her mother understood her daughter's aspirations and got in her way. Sometimes her mother cried, wiping her eyes with the edge of her apron, but her father supported Minnie immediately. Minnie was perfectly happy, having entered her first year. She completely immersed herself in her studies. She had new friends, an independent residence in the dormitory, in short, adult life. Minnie plunged into her studies with great enthusiasm and she responded to her efforts. These successes were further cemented by an increased scholarship. Before she knew it, 2 years had flown by. Then she applied to university in her field of study. And university, that's a whole other life. It was there that she met her first love, Dwayne. They met while studying. He proposed marriage almost immediately, as all young people do. Her parents agreed, they just wanted them to wait a while with the children, to finish their studies so the family could grow up. Minnie agreed. She and her husband have visited her parents a couple of times, but the last trip ended halfway through unexpectedly. So there she stood, looking after the car as it drove away. In her mind, Minnie knew she had not misheard, but her heart refused to believe what was happening. The facts that brought her back to reality were right there. The picture of her husband driving away in his car was even more real. There were 2 small suitcases on the ground, the dust rising from the dirt road. He didn't even make it to his parents' house. She was ashamed to look her parents in the eye. And what a fool Minnie was not to see the obvious. The girl discerned the red stop lights and her heart raced with joy. He'll be back. It's a silly joke. Dwayne was always joking like that. Only the car slowed down a little, apparently on a bump, and moved on, leaving both hope and heartbreak behind. Minnie stared into the distance for a long time to see if the gray car would appear. Then she knew it was over. It must be like dogs or cats that are taken far into the woods, never to return. They wait for their owners until the last moment, hoping that a familiar vehicle would appear on the road and take them back. How many of them, abandoned and betrayed, left on the roadside or in the woods? Now Minnie is among them. The only difference was that she had parents. Bitterness rose to her throat and she felt a stabbing wound in her chest, as if someone had stuck a sharp knife there. Truly, she knew exactly his name. Minnie turned away from the road, dropped her hands dolefully, grabbed her suitcases, and walked down the familiar path. Only a couple of kilometers separated her from her parents' home. She had not been there for months. And now, as it was called, she had come for a holiday. If she had only known what fate would bring. Her leg gave out, and the girl fell on the grass. She lay there with no strength to get up. Minnie rolled over on her back, stretched out her arms and looked up into the sky. It was clear and clean. And in the distance, a black cloud, it's going to rain. It smells like grass. And the grasshoppers are singing a chirping song, talking about something only they know. Minnie closed her eyes, took a full breath. God, it makes me want to live. She laughed and her laughter turned into a sob, a long groan. She covered her face with her hands and gave vent to her feelings. No one was around, even cars rarely drove. Minnie sat up, looked around and screamed, putting all the strength in her voice, like a wounded animal howling. And anyone who heard it would have been surprised. She felt her senses letting go, longing to see her mother, to cling to her father and to William. It was Minnie who had gone to the city to study, and her brother who had stayed in the village. Where he was born, he stayed, so to speak. He was a good lad, capable. He was married and raised 2 sons. William built a house not far from his home. He's always looking out for parents, and he has a good wife. Minnie, on the other hand, has nothing to boast about. So, her marriage was a lie and a dysfunctional one. Dwayne spoke of love at first sight. He looked at her the way no one else did, dusting her off. They had a good life. Really, Minnie had nothing to compare it to. They rented an apartment, got settled in, wanted a place of their own. They rented a session, had a feast, and invited their friends, who are now in common. Minnie believes it would have been like that, but a black cloud, that creeps closer and closer, intervenes in life. And Minnie is silly, she didn't look up at the sky, she wasn't expecting a storm, so she stayed on the roadside. She picks up her luggage again and walks. Here's her home in sight. But she had to walk across the street. And the gossip will come right away. Minnie, are you alone? Why do not you go by car? The neighbor was a little surprised, scrutinizing the suitcases. Dwayne's writing his dissertation, Minnie lied, smiling through her strength. He's a scientist. The neighbor rolled her lip, pondering something. So you're on the bus? Yes, he is, Minnie nodded. So they don't run today? The old lady suddenly remembered. There was an extra one, a little one like that. Minnie blinked her eyes quickly. She went on, realizing that lying was not her thing. Goodbye. Go with God, kiddo, her neighbor crossed her. Arrived? A friend who lived across the street looked out. The window was wide open, and it was hot outside, with only pesky flies in the way. The wind was warm. Minnie looked up at the sky, it was about to start raining. Good thing she made it home in time. I'm here for a couple of weeks, maybe more, Minnie shrugged, setting her suitcases on the ground. Her life had just changed dramatically. And she didn't know what she was going to do next. Just as surely she didn't know at all what to say to people. Hi, Minnie, Ted appeared at the window nearby. Minnie wasn't surprised, even though she didn't know he was courting Sarah these days. Hello? Leave your husband, come to me, he smiles, and his own front tooth is missing, I'll take you in. Ted once wooed Minnie. Minnie laughed good-naturedly, of course, but she gave the guy no hope. She understood, her heart didn't belong to him. Her soul keeps asking to fly, to the big earth. Minnie loves the village with all her soul, but she doesn't want to live there. It was only when Minnie left that she was free in the city. When she came back, she knew it wasn't for good. And Minnie loved the countryside even more, because happiness here was finite, and therefore more precious. And she perceived Ted as no other than a friend. And he kissed her, but never got one, except on the cheek, against her will. Go away already, Sarah pushed Ted away, and she laughed, her chest pounding in rhythm. Her friend gained weight. The girls don't seem the same age as Minnie. One is skinny as a cane, with big eyes on a skinny face, and the other is full-bodied, lush-chested, with a second chin. But she is more appreciated in chores and has a lot to hug. I may be suffering from love, Ted went on to say. We know how you suffer. Go away already, let me talk to my friend, Sarah nodded, popping a handful of seeds into her mouth. A sharp wind slammed the sash of the window so that the glass almost shattered. Ah! Sarah grabbed her heart frightened. She spread her arms, caught both sashes, fluttering like a butterfly. You come in later, when you've talked to your mother. Tell her where your sweetheart is. The first drops splashed on Minnie's face, and she blinked involuntarily. I will, the girl nodded, picked up her suitcases, and walked through the front door. Minnie was sure her mother had heard her and her neighbor chatting, only she hadn't come out. She was waiting for an explanation. What on earth would she have to say? The truth? What if Dwayne comes back? What if he comes to his senses? Only does she need such a husband? She walked leisurely up the porch, feeling new splashes on her skin. The heavy leaden sky mourned her grief. Once it cries out all the tears, it will ease and turn white. Too bad it's not always like that with humans, they can keep their grief in their chests for years. Do you need them there? We should take an example from nature. And here I am baking pies, greeted her mother with a tired smile. Come in, she hugged her daughter, kissed her and continued cooking again. Father will be back from fishing soon, fresh fish to fry like you like. Minnie sat in her chair, watching her mother do chores. She waited for her questions. You must be hungry after the trip. Dorothy turns around. Here, just the first batch came up. She sets a tray on the table, covered with a handkerchief, and under it the ruddy pies are emanating heat. They're with rice and egg. The ones in the oven are with cabbage. I don't like cabbage. Minnie shakes her head. Well, when is she going to ask what's making her sick? Then I also make it with apples. The woman walks over to the second table, taking a piece of dough. You take a bite and we'll sit down at the table when Dad gets back. Call William, too. They know you're coming, and they haven't set a time yet. Have them come in 2 hours? Mom, Minnie said first, unable to stand. Why don't you ask where Dwayne is? So you're my daughter, Minnie, the mother shrugged, chuckling. If he'd come and not you, I'd ask. But why pry? Maybe you had a fight. You got married and made up on your own, without us getting involved. Or did something happen? The mother suddenly changed her face, turned to her daughter. He's fine, she reassured her daughter. Okay, Dorothy nodded, turning to face the table again. He left me, Mom, Minnie sobbed suddenly, tucking into her palms. He thought me away like a dog in the road and left me. Mother froze. A piece of dough slipped from her palm onto the table. Mother turned sharply. What road? She asked fearfully. Not far from here, Minnie nodded her head in that direction. The rain pounded on the metal windowsill, filling the glass with spray. The phone rang, but Minnie dropped it. Who is it? It's my mother-in-law, she sighed sadly. I got her into this, too. It's her son, let her be ashamed of him. We have nothing to hide. I don't want to say anything, Minnie said and turned off the gadget. Wait, the mother wiped her hands on her apron and went out, and came back with a bottle of something amber, knocked the bottom on the table and went for the stacks. The glass clattered against each other, and the small containers tripled in line. You're not pregnant? The mother asked, unscrewing the lid just in case. Minnie shook her head. Then it'll do you good. She poured the alcohol. The important thing is to know the measure. She handed the shot to her daughter, who took it incredulously. Her mother had never allowed such a thing, keeping a strict eye on her daughter, but here she offered it herself. What are you looking at? Drink, she said and drank, and then ate the pie. That wasn't the custom in Minnie's family. Her father used to drink on holidays, and her mother didn't like alcohol at all, only occasionally having a glass for company. William, too, allowed himself, as any man would, but always within limits. Minnie had once tried alcohol, and she did not like it so much that she could not look. But now her soul demanded it. She exhaled and took a volley of it, too. Her throat burned with fire. Minnie's eyes darted open, her mouth open with surprise and consternation. Snack, her mother held out the pie, and tell me the story in order. Dorothy got up from the table, took the pickles out of the refrigerator. She took them out of the jar with a fork, put them on a plate, poured more liquor, propped her head on her hand, and got ready to listen. Don't forget the pies, Minnie reminded her. Mother mused with her hand. Minnie lowered her eyes, wondering where to begin. If you don't want to, don't tell, Mother warned. What does it matter when to tell? You'll have to anyway. Silly me, Minnie chuckled bitterly, I didn't even notice my husband had another woman. Do you know her? Only know the name, the girl shook her head, I feel she's ours, from the university. I mean, my husband and I were almost always together, and still I didn't keep track. He's not a 1-year-old baby to keep track of, Dorothy retorted, he's a bad husband to keep on a leash, the mother turned away. We began to pack for you, as we agreed, Minnie continued. Stacked up our things. Dwayne insisted that I stack mine separately, supposedly so it would be more convenient, so I wouldn't have to look for it. I didn't see the catch in that, except he was kind of nervous and twitchy. I also remember that he got a message. He looked at the phone, and quickly hid it in his pocket. Is something wrong? I asked. My parents texted, asking me to come over right away. Let's go together, I suggested. Only he didn't appreciate the idea. Go to your parents' house. Stay there as long as you need. I'll come back later. He didn't say what happened. He just said that he would take me to your place and then go back to the city. That's why I wrote to mother-in-law myself. But she didn't know anything. That's when I got scared. I looked at my husband and saw him as a stranger. He wasn't going to his parents, he was going somewhere else. I didn't tell him right away that I knew. I felt bad the whole way we drove. My heart was frightened. I asked him to stop to buy some water, and I was sitting there, wrapping a newspaper around myself. And then his husband came out, I got into his phone. And there was a bunch of messages from Myrtle. I'm not going to tell you, Mom, verbatim, what words she wrote him, but they agreed to go on a vacation together to the sea. Can you imagine? Me, to the village, and himself for 2 weeks on the beach to have fun with someone. Dorothy handed her daughter the stack in her hand again, and the liquid spilled over her body, which was becoming cotton candy from it. The rain was intensifying. I can't wait for my father to come back. Mother looked out into the street. He must be soaking wet, so he won't get sick. Keep on talking, and don't say anything as soon as father comes back. There's no need for a man to know that. He's been having some pain in his heart lately. We'll tell him later. While you're at home anyway, and when you're going to town, I'll go with you, pack your things, find an apartment. It's one mother, but there can be many husbands, she said in her mother's words. You don't need such a son-in-law, you can't even get a conscience. When he came back, he made no excuses. I love you, he said, and feel nothing for you, as if you were my sister. Bastard. And I sit there, and his words reach me as if from afar. I do not understand to the end how it is possible. I had a happy life, and then it was gone, and I don't know what I did. He dropped me off near the village and left, and it was only later that it all came to me. Father has come. Her mother jumped up from her seat when she heard the heavy footsteps on the porch. I'll go get some dry clothes. And she came out of the kitchen. Yay! Here we are. Minnie heard her father's voice in the hallway, and her heart jumped for joy. A good father she had, everyone would want one, just where's the car? I don't understand, he reasoned. Minnie came out to meet him, leaning against the door jamb. I'm going to go change, he warned, then we'll hug. Did you bring the fish? His mother showed up with dry clothes. Of course, he held the bag up, bragging, 12 tails. The mother took the twitching bag and went into the kitchen. Have you been drinking or something? Troy stared at his daughter incredulously, sniffing, and where's Dwayne? And where is the car? Dwayne went to his parents' house, they asked for help with something, the mother replied, shouting from the kitchen. It was not the prodigal son-in-law she was worried about, but her beloved husband. She knew that she would take it to heart, would worry, and then, God forbid, something would happen to his heart. She imagined how her father would shake with anger because his own daughter had been hurt. He could have grabbed the car keys to go into town, found Dwayne, and had a man-to-man talk. No, not so he could go back, but so he could answer for what he had done. You have to think about it, approach it with a cool head, not a hot heart. I see, father nodded, making his way to the bathroom. Minnie returned to the kitchen, watching her mother shake the fish out of the bag. Go get changed, the two of us will make it quicker, her mother commanded, and she was worried inside. She wants to call her son-in-law, tell him everything. And then she decides that he is not worthy that still think about him. Are we having some kind of holiday? Her father walked into the kitchen and saw the liquor. My daughter has arrived, she passed her session successfully, Dorothy smiled, if you want to rejoice, your soul will always find a reason. It's still good that it's all open now. Don't need such a man, let others pay attention to the girl. Still, what about the parents? Troy sat down at the table, and Minnie returned in her homemade suit and began to clean the fish. Helping out at the cottage, Dorothy coined, and Minnie was surprised at how well her mother could lie. You call William. Have them come over, Dorothy asked. Troy got up and went to the back room for the phone. It was old, and he needed to charge it more and more often. It was time to buy another one, but who was he to call? He uses his gadget once in a while. Minnie stands at the sink scaling fish. She grew up in love and care, with good parents. They have quarreled on occasion, but she always knew that they loved each other and helped each other in everything. Suddenly she heard footsteps on the stairs again. Quick, as if a man was in a hurry. The rain had already stopped, only large drops were falling from the trees and roofs. William ran quickly into the house, looking frantically at everyone. His brother stood looking at his sister, and her soul went to her heels. It was very frightening. "Where is he?" she almost screams, and Minnie senses that trouble is in the air. "What are you shouting for?" the mother intervened, about to push her son out. She herself was hinting at him with her eyes and whispering something. "Alan called from town, my friend. Says Minnie's been dumped." It turned out that the same Alan had arrived at the station with his wife. And what was his surprise when he saw Dwayne with another girl. At first, he thought Minnie was also somewhere nearby, but then the couple kissed. The hunch immediately pierced his brain, and he decided to find out if Minnie herself knew about it. He approached, saying hello. Dwayne was not happy to see him. He changed his face and stepped aside with him. There was no use in hiding anything, so Dwayne said it was over between them. "Abandoned, then," sighed Alan, who had Minnie growing up before his eyes. "Pity the girl. She only said good things about her husband, and he's quick to forget the vows he made just 2 years ago." "You stay out of our business," Dwayne waved at him. "We'll figure it out ourselves," and left for the new girl. "Don't yell," the mother threatened and pushed her son in the side. "I don't understand anything." "Who called?" Troy appeared in the kitchen. "What happened?" William looks at his mother and sister, realizing his father doesn't know anything about anything. "A friend of his mother comes to the rescue again. He says tickets to the sea are cheap." "You sit down, William, sit down. Is Carla coming soon?" "She will come," she replies gruffly. "Don't talk to your mother like that," his father warns and shakes his head. "What's got into you?" William clenched his fists, blood boiling, wanting to beat his son-in-law. If he were here, they wouldn't hold him back, but William wouldn't back down from what he had planned. Minnie stared into the sink, as if she were guilty, and could hardly breathe. She felt so sorry for herself, bitter all over again. "Shall we go out?" her brother says to her, and she blinks rapidly to keep from crying. "Let her finish cleaning the fish," her mother asks. "You'll have time to talk. Better call Carla to come quickly. Troy, why don't you go down to the cellar and get some mushrooms?" Troy comes out of the kitchen, and the mother whispers to her son, "I know everything, but don't shout loudly. It's clear enough. You don't have to say anything. You can't let your father worry." "I'll kill him," he growls. "And then what?" ponders the mother. "Am I going to raise your children?" "He's not worthy of it, William." "Why don't you say something?" brother said angrily, looking at sister. "And you stay away from her. I'm sick of you. Why do you bother with Minnie? Do you think she's happy about it? You're like a rooster that wants to fight." "Well, does she think if she's out of town it's okay to hurt my sister?" "That's it, father's coming, be quiet," ordered the mother. The pies did not come out as lush as usual, but some slouchy, like sickly pies. Dorothy hurriedly made them and put them in the oven, but Minnie was having trouble with the fish. She had to restrain herself from crying in front of everyone. "Are you expecting guests?" Carla and her sons entered the house. "Come in, of course," the mother shouted from the kitchen. "William, Troy, spread the table for everyone to sit down. Do you need help?" Carla entered the kitchen, looking around at everyone to get a sense of the mood. William shouted loudly at home, she soothed. So there he was, nervous, running off to his mother. "Change Minnie," Dorothy nods at her daughter, and Carla, realizing everything, rolls up her sleeves. "Hi," she kisses the girl on the cheek, standing at the sink instead. Minnie nods, and there is a pity and anger hovering in the kitchen that makes her want to escape to the place where she recently lay. She wanted to be alone. She didn't have the strength to see anyone, and it wasn't their fault. There's Carla's pitiful look. She's a good girl. When William told her he was getting married, Minnie was glad. They're just like friends now, aren't they? I don't feel well, the mother nods at her daughter, and the father looks intently. Are you sick or something, he asks. Just closed the session, Troy, I told you. She hasn't slept much, she's stressed. You go lie down, Dorothy sends her daughter to her room, we'll call you when it's ready. Once again, a lie with a grain of truth in it. Minnie looks up, and everyone looks at her, Carla with pity, her mother with understanding, William with a furrowed brow, and only her father in the dark. She will, as soon as she gets used to the idea. Thanks to her mother for supporting her, not saying, I warned you, but standing up for her. Minnie went to her house. There were 4 rooms in the house, the parents' bedroom at the farthest end, the hall in front of it, where everyone got together, and there was a big TV set, and their rooms with William closer to the kitchen. His on the right, hers on the left. There were never any doors, so the curtains covered the doorway. Of course, there was no soundproofing, but it allowed them to hide from prying eyes. The room looked as it had 10 years ago. Life was going on, but here it looked as if it had stopped. Beside the bed stood an old nightstand, a piece of furniture from her grandmother. Divided into 2 parts by a shelf, it held her childhood diaries, questionnaires, notebooks, and photo albums. When she came here with Dwayne, she would pull something out of the treasure trove and sit up close to her husband, commenting on the albums or notebooks. Such evenings she treasured especially, when past and present merged together. The window faced the orchard. The apple tree, which bore fruit every 2 years, did not bear fruit this time. It was green and thick-legged, with its roots in the ground. Minnie opened the window, and the smell of nailed dust burst into the room, mingling with the scents of flowers. How many memories lurked in her parents' home? There were voices behind her. Minnie listened, but she couldn't make out what they were talking about. She climbed up on the windowsill, put her back against the wall, and stared out at the yard. Across the fence, for as long as she could remember, lived the Taylors, a family of many children. And that's where the boys' window faced hers. She remembered being shy with the older ones, and they all looked alike, but so beautiful. And the girls in the family came out looking good. Minnie sometimes played with them, but they were always with each other in the family. They were always friendly, and they stood up for each other. Suddenly the tool in the window across the street hissed, and Minnie wanted to jump off the windowsill as if she were 13 years old again. The sash opened, and she saw a man. Hello, neighbor, he smiled. Minnie couldn't say his name with certainty. How everyone had scattered to different parts of the country, how could she remember everyone? I remember one went somewhere, 2 to the capital, but that was all her mother's word, and Minnie wasn't particularly interested in their fate, alive and well. Hello, she nodded back. For some reason the man was positioned low, as if on his knees, rather than at full height. There was that childish expression in his face that Minnie remembered. Do you recognize me? He inquired. Minnie didn't feel comfortable admitting it, so she shrugged. Jack, she tried to guess. He laughed kindly, in a way that made the girl smile. There is such an infectious laugh that makes people smile. I'm Anthony, he corrected her. Kyle is in the capital, he is boss now. Here do I, he sighed sorrowfully. Hear what? Minnie didn't understand. He somehow looked at her intently, casting his eyes all over her, and was silent for a moment, pondering. A sudden knock made Minnie turn around sharply, and her heart flutter in her chest. It was the custom in their house to knock even without a door, showing respect for the owner. Never did either mother or father allow themselves to just walk in, violating personal space. The children were respected, and they were taught to respect those around them. Come in, Minnie retorted, looking at the doorway. It's me, her brother walked in, pulling the curtains open. Minnie turned around to the neighbor's window, but there was no one there anymore. It was still open, but the man had vanished, as if he'd been dreaming. "You'll have to excuse me," William began, looking down at his feet. Admitting mistakes is never easy, but that's what makes a person so valuable, the ability to look at what happened from the outside and understand his own wrongdoing. "Were you talking to someone?" Minnie jumped down from the windowsill and closed the frame tightly, not wanting to make a mess of things. Putting the tool back in place, she turned to her brother. "Give me a hug or something," she looked at him. Despite the age difference, which used to seem enormous and now was just 7 years, they were close, and William had spent time with his sister since she was a child. Like for his parents, she remained that little girl for him to protect. "Come here," he attracted her. "Let's not talk about him," Minnie asked, snuggling into her own man, and he nodded in agreement. "Which brother were you friends with?" The girl opened her arms and nodded toward the neighbor's house. "With Anthony, why? Is he at his parents' house now?" "He came over a while ago," the guy confirmed. "He's a young man, and now he's confined to a wheelchair. Something happened there at work, like they were sawing wood and a tree fell on him. They pulled him out of the world, but only half of it. By the way, his fiancée was beautiful, they say she was going to marry him, and then she was blown away as soon as she realized that she was left with an invalid. It's not beauty that makes you happy," he said bitterly, and Minnie got a lump in her throat. Was she in grief? That's the one to feel sorry for. Him, it turns out, she saw. Only that, decided to warn William, "Don't you dare feel sorry for him, I can see in your eyes that you're going to. Look at him the way you usually look at others, he doesn't like that, say hello there, and don't ask about the rest." "Not silly," Minnie nodded. "That's not what I meant. Just saying just in case. I mean, he was stubborn even when he was a kid, even more so now. I came in after he came back, didn't know where to put eyes, and he's chatting with me like nothing happened. We had a drink, we had a snack, we talked about life. I haven't seen him for a long time. It's not good that we met on such an occasion, but I'm glad he's back, he's a great guy." "How long will he be here?" inquires Minnie softly, so that the conversation could not be heard outside. "Who knows? But where can he go from his parents now? It's a good thing his hands work, he won't go to waste. Do you know what kind of paintings he makes? He just got back, came to his senses a bit, and went straight to work, so as not to bother his parents. They don't buy well here, so sister came to town one day, took the work, and sold it in town." Minnie listened to the story, forgot all about her grief. She was young, uninjured, and that her husband had been caught like that, she had to get over it and get on with her life. The sashes of the neighbor's window slammed shut, men's hands flashed and disappeared. "William, where are you?" cries mother from the kitchen. "We're coming," he replies. "The last thing I'll say is, if Dwayne meets him, it'll be his own fault. He won't get away without a beating." "William." "I've said it all," he brushed it off and walked out. Minnie turned on her phone, and immediately the messages started coming in. Her mother-in-law called several times. The former mother-in-law. She's a good woman, kind. Minnie had once heard from many people about bad mothers-in-laws, and had been lucky herself, sadly short-lived. Suddenly the phone rang. Why hide? The man is worried. Yes, she answered. Minnie, I heard a sigh of relief. Where are you? At Mom's, she replied calmly, looking down at the floor. What's the matter? You asked about Dwayne, and I couldn't help myself. I call you and you're not available, I call him and he doesn't pick up. Is everything okay? There's no us. Let him tell you himself, daughter-in-law decides. I don't want to complain, whine, just leave with my head held high, not to be pitied. Oh, the mother sighs, and she hears Minnie's father-in-law's voice fidgeting in the kitchen. Minnie, please tell it like it is. I'm going crazy, I can barely get through to you, and you're all cryptic. He's got another girl now, Minnie said somehow evenly and calmly. The man has gone to the sea. To what sea? Mother-in-law didn't understand. The usual kind. I don't understand, Minnie. What's not to understand? The guy's tired of family life. You'd better ask him about the details, I don't know anything else. Excuse me, I have relatives waiting for me at the table. Goodbye. There was silence on the phone. Minnie could have just pressed hang up, but she respected her mother-in-law. After all, she was a veteran teacher, one of the best in the school, so she waited for the parting words to come from the other side, too. Diana, called Minnie. Yes, her voice was heard again. I have to go. Yes, Minnie, go, we'll call you later. Minnie didn't think so. She had only answered the phone to put the man's mind at ease, now there was no need to talk. She was about to throw the phone on the bed when she saw a message from a friend. Minnie, I don't understand, did you and Dwayne break up? Nancy inquired, attaching a picture of Dwayne with the blonde on the train. Wow, Minnie grinned, recognizing her husband's traveling companion as a girl from the general company. I think her name was Cheryl. Why was she called Cheryl, though? That was still her name. But her intuition was right, it was an acquaintance. She wondered where the photo had come from, but she didn't ask. She left her phone in the room and joined the others. The atmosphere at the table was kind. Minnie's gratitude poured into her soul along with the newly accepted liquor that her mother occasionally poured. She sat on her left hand as her father sat on his right, and the restless boys patted each other under the table, but it only made her happier to see her family assembled. Only those closest to her were gathered here. She realized that very well now. Sometimes a picture from the train would come up, but for some reason it was immediately replaced by Anthony, or rather his story, told by his brother, and Minnie knew she was lucky. Before she knew it, an hour later, she was singing a song in the kitchen, just like when she was a kid. Carla, palms up, watched the singers, swaying to the beat of the tune. Similar faces, with the difference in wrinkles, eyes, voices, the daughter was a copy of her mother. One couldn't guess what Minnie will look like 30 years from now. But who will be there, the question is who. Carla is lucky to have a husband, she constantly thanks God for him, love, understanding, caring, and a desire to provide for the family, everything comes together in a man. It's time to pack up. Minnie doesn't want the guests to leave, and it's time to put the kids to bed. I'll walk you out, she says to her mother. We'll do it ourselves, Carla replies, you just rest. I want some fresh air, she explains. Carla looks at her mother-in-law, approval waiting. Go ahead, but don't be too long, I'll worry, Dorothy says. Minnie sees her brother and wife off, walks back, and somehow feels joyful. The sky's like a sieve, all in stars, like glittering holes. They blink and shimmer, that's their job. What is the meaning of human life? That's the age-old question. Minnie's a student, but she's been wondering the same thing. And that's what she decided, the main thing is to live your life in such a way that you won't be ashamed of it, that you will live another life the same way when you look back on it. She was ready to bet that a star had fallen from the sky, and she even had time to think about happiness. The windows of the house next door were lit, but the dark curtains had not yet been drawn, and so the room was as plain as the eye could see. Minnie didn't mean to peek, it just happened. Supported by her father, with one hand resting on a crutch, Anthony walked. How much concentration was read on his face, it seemed every muscle on his body was collected and called upon to move, but it didn't. Her lower body hung limply, unable to do what it used to do with ease. The girl stood, unable to tear her gaze away from what was happening. Suddenly a woman appeared in the window, and Minnie flinched in surprise, spotted as if she were doing something wrong. Her face instantly flashed, pouring red, but you couldn't see it in the dark street, where only a lone streetlight burned in the distance. The woman yanked the curtain sharply, and the picture went out, and Minnie raced into the house, feeling her face burn. Did you close the front door? Her mother clarified, getting ready for bed. Yep, Minnie nodded and slipped into her room. She opened the window to air it out, closed the curtains tightly before turning on the lights, unpacked her suitcase, and pulled out her pajamas. Tonight, for the first time in months, she would have to sleep alone. And it was immediately disconcerting to realize that Dwayne was laying in her bed after someone else. She couldn't claim it, but it couldn't be otherwise. She took a bath and went back to her room. Through the curtains came the light from the street, apparently from the house next door, and a tune came through. She left the light on, lay down comfortably on the bed, tucked her arm under her head, and listened. Someone's skillful hands quickly plucked the strings, extracting harmonious sounds from the instrument. The hands sang of something sad, and the music penetrated the soul and squeezed it with invisible fingers, which made Minnie want to cry, and tears rolled down her cheeks. It was as if a bubble had burst, and from it spilled accumulated fatigue, awareness of uselessness, and heartbreak. The guitar cried, suffering after the performer, dragging the casual listener along with it. Suddenly it was over, and only the cicadas interrupted the silence of the summer night, and bats flew over the rooftops. Minnie wiped away her tears and closed her eyes, realizing how good it felt to be home, and a slight smile touched her lips. In the morning she rose with a wonderful mood. The sun was breaking through the curtains, the sparrows were chirping, the bird yard was making different voices. She wanted terribly to live and be among her family. Looking through her phone, she found messages from her mother-in-law, mutual acquaintances, all asking the same thing in one voice. Minnie, shaking her head, left the phone in her room. Good morning, she kissed her mother as she entered the kitchen. Dorothy had risen early as usual, managed the bird, and was now making dumplings. Sit down for breakfast, she suggested. Why didn't you wake me up? I would have helped, Minnie nodded at the dough. You'll rest for a few days, and then you'll work, too, her mother grinned. The day was beautiful. After breakfast, Minnie went out to the yard, filled a watering can with water, and went to water the tomatoes. The fence separating them from the neighbors consisted of 2 sections, an enclosed one, boards nailed tightly together, and a metal mesh. Finished with the plants in one place, she went further into the vegetable garden. As she got caught up in her work, she didn't immediately notice Anthony, who was carving something with a concentrated expression on his face. Sitting in the sun in his baby carriage, he was holding a thick board on his lap, wielding a small chisel over it. Not about to tear the man away from his work, Minnie leaned toward the watering cans, intending to leave, when he looked up and looked directly at her. The girl froze in an uncomfortable pose, not knowing what to do. Well, hello there, Anthony smiled. Hi, she nodded back. Are you in our area for long? I don't know. I'm done with the session, there's nothing to do in town, maybe the whole summer, she straightened up, and, not knowing where to put her hands, folded them across her chest, a little embarrassed. Summer here is good, fragrant, steamy, I'd say, with a taste of childhood. The river, the kebabs, the relatives. It wasn't until I got back here that I realized how much I missed it. Was that you playing yesterday? Decided to ask Minnie, and the man nodded. I forgot to close the window, I guess I was in the way. No, she replied hastily. That was wonderful. I haven't heard something like that in a long time. Thank you, he said somehow embarrassed. Also, my brother said you make wonderful paintings, she went on to praise him. She wanted to cheer the boy up, to breathe even more confidence into him. Everyone decides for themselves whether something can be considered beautiful, he parried. Until you see it with your own eyes, don't believe anyone. Minnie was a little taken aback, not sure how to respond. Do you want to see it? He invited. She hesitated a little, pondering. After all, they were just neighbors, and there was nothing wrong with that. Sure, she nodded, stepping closer to the fence. Sorry, I can't get close to you, he shrugged, and you can't see anything from a distance. Minnie was embarrassed, scolding herself for not being far away. I'll be right there, she rushed to the wicket, and after a while was standing beside him. This one I just started, he put aside the painting he had in his lap, turned around in his wheelchair, and drove toward the barn. This is where I have my workshop, if you can call it that, he gave a tour, and Minnie looked around. There were tools lying everywhere, some she had seen for the first time, chalks of various sizes, planks, and logs. The room was small, but it was evident that the owner had kept it in order. Until recently the father of the family, and now Anthony. Minnie stared at the picture that caught her eye and became numb. She clapped her eyes wide open, unable to believe that such a miracle could be made from a simple log. "Can I touch it?" the girl said, mesmerized, not thinking about how it looked from the outside. The work so impressed her and mesmerized her that she wanted to touch every detail. Of course, Anthony grinned, pleased with the effect produced. Since childhood he'd been fond of carving, his grandfather had taught him everything, and he was good at it. Then gave up, went into adulthood, went for the big money, I thought, who needs it, and now remembered, went from the worker's hands and left. It's good to have a profession, you won't die of hunger, so Anthony remembered his old hobby. Hands somehow confidently made their own paths, stamped wood, and animals, rivers and trees came into being. He saw something, as if telling him what a tree would be good for. It would be good to walk through the woods and look for material himself. Only now he could not. Thanks to my father and Ralph, my friend, who are always ready to help. So she has to work with what she has. As Minnie looks at the snow-covered village, the picture seems to come to life, the snowflakes hanging in the air. The delicate branches of the tree are worked in such a way that it's hard to believe a person could do this. Nearby on another picture of bears frolicking in the woods, on a third of birds on the pond, and here's a church with 5 poppies. Minnie looked back at the master, and she was filled with admiration in her eyes. She knows, of course, that there are such people, but seeing them for herself is different. When I put the lacquer on, it will be different to look at, promises Anthony. They're beautiful, Minnie whispers. Anthony, his mother calls out, who are you in there with? Minnie stopped by, she replies, and the girl is pleased that her name is remembered. Hello, Minnie comes out of the barn, smiling. Hi. So, is our handyman any good, the mother inquires. That's the word. He's good. Why are you alone? I saw you walking with your suitcases yesterday, and your husband didn't come, did he? The question confused both Minnie and Anthony. The lightness that had hovered between them a few minutes ago seemed to have evaporated. They felt as if they had been taken and torn in different directions. Minnie wanted to tell it like it was, but the girl remembered in time that her father didn't know anything about anything. He has business in town, she replied, trying to squeeze out a smile. Thank you, Anthony, for showing your works. She turned to her neighbor. They're really beautiful, the words came out of her heart. I'll be going, she said. Goodbye. And to herself. Where have you been? Her mother inquired. At a neighbor's, looking at pictures. Ah. Those, Dorothy nods her head in agreement. The boy has a real talent. What kind of boy is he? Laughs Minnie. And to me you are always children, replies the mother. He's a good one, not like some, hints the son-in-law. When are we going to tell father? We will. As soon as we go into town to get our things, we'll tell him. We can, of course, with William, she pondered. He hasn't called you? No, Minnie shook her head. Why do you ask? So you don't do anything stupid, you don't forgive. Don't you dare, Minnie, do you hear? You'll be sorry if you fall for sweet talk. And you're like a scholar, sighed the girl. We're all like that. I had a man once, even before your father, she sighed, he spoke sweet words to me, and I forgave him, only in vain. Why don't I know anything about him? Her daughter wondered. Is he worth talking about? That's not what a family is made of, Minnie. Time in the village had 2 properties, it poured out like a lingering mass, or it flew like an arrow, and before she knew it, it was night. And Minnie realized that she felt much more at ease here. She even felt happy there, where she had fled to the city not so long ago. They did tell her father, but somehow calmly, with a smile on his face. He thought it was a joke at first, but then accepted the state of affairs. It happens, Troy, it happens, said the mother. It's all right, we're not in the last century, you see how young people are nowadays. I wish I could knock your youth on the head. Don't grumble, replied Dorothy, we didn't bring them up, we're not to blame. They went into town together to get their things. The apartment was just as Minnie had left it a week ago, and apparently Dwayne hadn't come back yet. There wasn't much stuff, they hadn't settled in, so they put everything in the trunk and packed something in the back seat. "Are you moving or something?" the neighbor looked out.
Yeah,
The mother confirmed. To a better future. Mother-in-law called often, but Minnie had nothing to discuss with her. Friends from the university texted her on Messenger for a while and dropped her, and Minnie realized that she never had any real friends. Here was a fun life, lots of acquaintances, but in fact, ghostly everything, only here is real, in the country. She helped her mother at home, went to visit her brother, but she was drawn to Anthony, some kind of inner force was in him, magnetically attracted her, and she wanted to communicate. And somehow she herself did not notice how she began to visit her neighbors more and more often. She would bake pancakes and pies, she would ask Anthony for a treat, and he would be kind in return. He shows her how everything is set up, what knives and jigsaws and files are for. And Minnie wants to try it for herself. Anthony put the tool in the girl's hands, wrapped his arm around hers, and stuck the point into the wood. She feels the hand as the knife digs into the pliable flesh, as clear lines appear step by step, and it seems to Minnie that she has put her hand to the miracle. Her eyes burn, and her teacher praises her. "It's good, I'll fix it up a bit, and it's good for the first time." And Minnie hides an embarrassed smile, like she once did as a child. "I tried to remember what Anthony used to be, but they all look the same, no clear memories." But now he can say with certainty what kind, attentive, interesting storyteller, and handsome. "And what's that?" The girl caught a glimpse of some work in progress, about to approach her, but Anthony rushed forward so sharply that she couldn't see it that he nearly toppled over in his stroller. Careful, she picks him up, balancing him, and she barely manages to put the wheels in place. Anthony walks with jowls, feeling his helplessness, pressing his fingers into the armrests, restraining the emotion inside him. "I didn't mean to," Minnie somehow apologizes, realizing she's caused the mood shift. "It's okay," he says softly. "I don't like the look of work before it's finished."
yeah,
Sure, Minnie hastens to agree, feeling out of place. As time passes, Minnie stops by Sarah's as promised. Cheerful Sarah doesn't look back, only forward. Lives with Ted, doesn't care what anybody else thinks. When she found out about Dwayne, she said, "Well, he'll be sorry." She was right. It took Dwayne 3 weeks to remind himself. And he hadn't come alone, he brought his mother and father with him. Dorothy had not been able to find her place this morning, she couldn't understand why she felt uneasy. She phoned all her relatives, everything was all right, but her heart wasn't in the right place. By noon a car stopped outside their house and a delegation came out with flowers. Dwayne, as if he was going to get married for the second time, in a suit and with a bouquet, he was like a bridegroom. Daughter-in-law wore a dress and amber beads and earrings. But the father did not come out for a long time, but his wife still forced him to. Minnie was with a neighbor at the time. It turned out that Anthony was preparing a present for her. As soon as he saw her for the first time, he decided to make a picture. He found a picture in a social networking site, where you can see her face clearly, put it on the board, and went to work. Mother was surprised when she saw it. It was very much like reality. Mother held the picture up to the lamp and admired it for a long time. "Why don't you make me such a beauty?" She squinted with a smile. "Are you in love?" "I'll make you one, too," he said, looking away. Does he have to fall in love? He had a fiancé, spoke of love, and still left him alone. Who's going to love him like that now? Pretty girl next door, young, 10 years apart, and the disease isn't in his favor. She is a girl, and he does not know why, but it is easy with her, just as if he knows her half of his life. He had never noticed her before, small, with 2 pigtails and gaps between her teeth. That was how he remembered her, and now she had changed beyond recognition, she had grown prettier. But he must not think of the recent betrayal. False hopes kill a man, and Anthony must be strong. Only the heart is not to command, it is not in harmony with reason. Minnie's eyes are huge, her mouth is open in surprise, and she looks. She looks with her eyes and her hands. No one has ever given her such gifts. How much skill, how much love is put into the work. I can't accept it, she says, and her own throat is dry. Her face cannot lie. She looks into Anthony's eyes and sees a soul that is pure, crystal, unadulterated. Such a one, if she loves, will give herself without a trace, to her last breath. She's yours, smiles the master. I decided to try a portrait. I think I took you as a model. Well, what kind of model am I, says Minnie shyly, but she can't take her eyes off the painting. The most beautiful, Anthony wants to say, and Minnie, in a burst of gratitude, snuggles up to him and kisses him on the cheek. Then she abruptly jumps away from him, as if she'd done a bad thing. She looks at him startled, waiting for a reaction, and he's silent. Not a muscle on his face flinches, he just stares at her point blank. And Minnie hears wheels rustling on the gravel. She wakes up and looks at the gate. She listens, and there's a car pulling up, doors slamming. Have you got visitors? She asks Anthony, and her heart goes in her heels. It seems that someone has come to see her. We weren't expecting anyone, he shrugs. And the girl is shivering. It's hot outside, and she's shivering like it's freezing outside. I'm going home, Minnie presses the present into her chest. She wraps her two arms around it, and the picture almost covers her entire torso. I'll walk her out, Anthony hurries after her, not sure why she's changed so much in her face. Swallowing, Minnie grasped the handle, the lock clicked. There was a car standing in front of her house, and Dwayne, her mother-in-law and father-in-law, were about to enter their yard. They saw Minnie, a little surprised. Looking at her front door, and then at the one she came out of. Did you get the house mixed up? The mother-in-law chuckles, trying to be cheerful. Minnie looks at her dumbfounded. Diana smiles, joking, as if she had just come to visit and nothing had happened. The father-in-law stands distantly, looking sad, but he has come to beg forgiveness with everyone else. Dwayne does not know where to put his eyes. Minnie crosses the threshold, walking on trembling legs. She sees that Sarah appears from the window behind the guests and waves her hands, saying to send them away. And behind her stood Anthony. He understood everything, he's not stupid, but he has no right to give out advice, so he calmly watched. But inside he was chaotic. Come, I'll give you a hug, her mother-in-law spread her arms, hurrying toward her daughter-in-law. Finally, Dwayne's eyes find an object that grabs her attention. It is the man in the stroller, not taking his eyes off of him. Minnie, standing nearby with a wooden plate clutched to her chest, and an unknown man behind her. Who's that? Dwayne asks Minnie instead of greeting him. A friend, Minnie says with dry lips. Alone against three, can't stand, young, such a one will be persuaded, but her mother is already running, hurrying, wiping her hands on her apron. Father was not at home. What a pity. He would have driven them all away now. So she called William. Let them know there is no more room for them here. Hello, in-laws, Diana smiles as she sees Dorothy.
Huh,
replies the latter, approaching her daughter. Minnie, I need you there, she nods at the house, trying to lead her away. Won't you let me in? The smile slides off her mother-in-law's face a little. Driving along, knowing full well how it would end. How she found out about her son's cheating, she scolded him hard. And he himself realized, as Cheryl left, what he had done. It didn't take long for love to last, a long vacation at sea. It turned out that Cheryl has another man, richer. Dwayne, as soon as he found out she was getting married, decided to get a divorce. So Cheryl disappeared. And when his mother put her mind at rest, he decided he had to get Minnie back. He couldn't believe she'd told her parents. He'd seen her following him, thought she was weak-willed, and it wouldn't be hard to get back. And now she already had another fiancé. Only he was no match for Dwayne. He looks much older, and is an invalid, too. There's nothing to talk about, Dorothy throws back. Dorothy, Diana tries to urge her on. Minnie and her mother turn back to the gate when suddenly they hear a scream. Her mother turns around. William came running in, starting to hit his son-in-law. There was blood running all over his face. "You'll kill him," the mother-in-law yells, rushing to her son's rescue. Minnie rushed to pull her brother away. It seemed like he was about to kill Dwayne. Only it wasn't the sneaky husband she felt sorry for, it was her own brother. The painting fell, knocking on the ground. But the girl paid no attention to it. "William," she shouted in her brother's ear, and she herself hung on his arm. And she didn't know what power was hidden there that she couldn't pull away. Her mother rushed over and the three of them calmed the fighting men down. Only Dwayne never got a chance to respond. "Dale, call the police," the mother-in-law commands her husband, and he looks on calmly at everyone. "Let's go," he commands, settling back behind the wheel. "Dale," his wife yells, but he's already said his piece. He'll take him to the hospital, have him examined, and then go home. He won't blush for other people's actions anymore, and he's made a laughingstock out of himself. "I told you to," pats Dorothy on the shoulder of William. "Don't you touch him." "I won't leave it like that," the mother helps Dwayne up. "Do you hear that?" "We hear it," Dorothy blows an invisible strand off her face. Dwayne looks angry, and the whites of her bloody face are brightly visible. Dark splatters have formed on the light-colored suit, they are penetrating the fabric. There is no way to wash that off. For a long time, Dwayne will remember the trip to his in-laws. "You traded me in for a cripple, didn't you?" she yells to the whole street, and Minnie's heart aches. Turning around, she sees the same calm face of Anthony. She didn't mean for it to happen, for her brother to get in a fight, for her mother to get nervous, for a man to be insulted. But it happened, it happened. "Go away," she says again, turning to the man she has spent the last 2 years with, clenching her teeth hard. This is absolutely unlike her. I have never seen wife like this before Dwayne. Always she was gentle, kind, and now her look was wild. "I don't need you like this," the husband reserves the last word for himself, while his mother is cursing around him, wailing, begging him to go to the hospital as soon as possible. "That fool has got his head in," she opens the car door and yells to her husband. "Shut up," the father couldn't stand it, starting the engine. "Either get in, or I'll go without you." To the whole village, disgraced. The family packed into the car, slammed the doors so hard they could be heard at the end of the street, and drove off. "You did the right thing," shouted Sarah from the window. "And William's the man." "Well done," and laughs gleefully. "Stop it," Dorothy's hand mouthed at her, but not maliciously, kindly. Minnie stood there as if she had been drenched in slop. The whole village now knew what was going on in their family. She wanted to break up quietly, she thought she would go to town, file papers, and be a free woman. Why did they have to come all the way out here? She turned to look at Anthony, and the front door was closed, he was gone. "Let's go home," her mother chased. Just then Minnie saw her present on the ground. She rushed to it, knelt down on her knees. There was a deep crack almost in the middle, it seemed to have fallen at an angle and cracked. She puts her shoulders down and picks up the painting, bitter and disappointed at how much work the master has put in, but she has not saved it. She had other things on her mind at the time. She looked at the neighbor's house. How will she look the man in the eye? That's 3 weeks of work, and she'd ruined it all in an instant. "Get up already," mother helps, "and what's this?" Inquires. Anthony made it, Minnie replies quietly, while she herself wants to cry, howling with shame and resentment. "I'm going home," says William, still clenching his fists, and, without waiting for an answer, leaves. The kettle was whistling, some of the water had managed to boil away. Mother turned off the stove and sat down at the table, taking the handkerchief off her head. She always tied it when she was in the kitchen so her hair wouldn't fall into the baked goods. "So?" Dorothy was the first to break the silence. "You look terrible. Good thing your brother-in-law didn't go to the police. Otherwise William would have been punished," she shook her head. "Gave it to business," Minnie scowled. "Might have been for the cause, only there's no law like that to wave your fists about." Swooped in like a kite, she fixed her hair. The front door rattled. "Father's coming," her mother announced, throwing her handkerchief back on. "You go ahead and wipe the sorrow off your face, that's the face you'll be burying us with, and now there's nothing to do." "Dorothy," father called from the threshold. "How is Aaron?" she inquired. "Not feeling well," Troy shook his head. "And while I wasn't home, they say you had visitors coming to see you." His brother had recently taken ill. "Only it didn't let up, only got worse. I could see the century was short-written, and while I was gone, they say you had visitors coming."
Yeah.
"They left already," Dorothy snickered. "Didn't like it here." "Where's William?" "He went home." "What did he come for?" "To say hello to the guests." "Dorothy," father clenched his fists. "That's funny to you, but they have connections in town. They'll put you in jail and that's it." "What's there to talk about?" the mother realizes herself. Minnie walked silently to her room, placed the picture carefully on the bed, and sat down across from it. It was beautiful all the same, only it was not clear whether it was the picture or Minnie herself, for it was painted from her. She got up and looked out the window to see if anyone was in the neighbor's yard. "It's empty." How does it feel to hear her say that? She must apologize by all means, because she had a visitor, and she was responsible for a person's behavior. The girl went out into the hall, looked around, neighbors were gathered, discussing what had happened, breathing the air, as if by chance. All went out into the street at once. And then the one who lives closest to him describes everything in detail, and the others listen and nod their heads. "Where are you going?" The mother was surprised when Minnie passed them. "Sit down to lunch." "I'll just be a minute," the girl points to the yard. Going next door again, the mother realizes, and Minnie is embarrassed. "And what are you doing there? I've seen the way he looks at you, you're tearing a guy's heart out for nothing. The summer will pass, you'll go to town, you'll meet some student there again, God forbid, of course. Only now I will not give you in marriage so easily, there is nothing to jump, you live first, and then decide." "How does he look?" Minnie wants details. When she looked at him, he looked away. "What do you mean, like this?" her mother gawked. "He can't tear himself away." "You're beautiful, just like me." Laughs. "Mommy," Minnie hugs her tightly. "You're beautiful, very beautiful." "Come on," Dorothy waves her hand, "I know where that beauty is. Under a pile of pies." "They're tasty," smirks her father. "I wanted to apologize for Dwayne's words," says Minnie. "So they're his, not yours." "He hurt the man, having said those things." "Said what?" the father interjects. "Called him a cripple," says the mother. "Hush, mother," urges her daughter, fearing that they will not hear her in the yard. "Look," Dorothy threatens with a finger. "You break a guy's heart and get away with it, and he's alive." "So I'm not doing anything," she blinks incomprehensibly. "That's what you think. It doesn't take much intelligence. You go around praising him." "No, I praise myself, really, the master is big, only I'm the ant for him, and you are different. Your great eyes and amazing are deep into his soul." "Troy, tell me." "I don't know your women's business." "I looked at it all simply at first, but now I see, he's in love," the mother gave her verdict. Falling in love how, wondered Minnie, eyes widening, and it was not clear whether she should rejoice at such news or grieve. "Don't you notice?" her mother asked. "I see, he'll get over it, he's been through more than that, but why tear up a man's soul?" "What am I supposed to do, not communicate with him?" Minnie asked a little frightened. Of course, she felt the attention from outside, she accepted the compliments, but it wasn't what attracted her, her inner strength. She was still married by paperwork. Why not talk? Stop baking pies and running around with them. There is no friendship between a man and a woman, all the same, one wants more, or even both. Dating is fine, I had a word with a neighbor, and then I went home. It's different for you. Well, what do you talk about for hours there? About life, paintings, he tells interesting books. Showed me how to cut wood. Cutting wood. That's what I mean, Dorothy sighed. I hope you remember crying into a pillow yourself the other day. No one wants to be abandoned, and you, seeing the state of affairs, think for yourself. You will be responsible for your actions later, you're an adult. He is not a toy, he is a man with a hard fate. It is hard for him, and his wife will have an even harder time. So think about it. Why are you giving the boy the benefit of the doubt? The father interjected. I'm not saying anything bad, Dorothy retorted. Only the facts are out there, you see what your daughter is looking at. I don't mind, the mother softened, but you have to keep a cool head, don't get your hopes up. I'm not getting married. And you weren't going to the first time either, and then you came and stunned me, the woman shook her head. Don't give people false hopes, first figure out with yourself what you want. And pity in such cases, not an advisor. You'll take care of them, and then you'll suffer all your life. It's not life, it's agony. Already decided everything for me? I don't need anyone else's fate, Dorothy replied. I have my own fate. Well, thank you, Troy voiced. And you decide your own destiny, Dorothy said, as if she hadn't noticed her husband's remark. There's always a choice, so figure out where the truth is. Now go where you need to go. Your father and I have set you on your feet, and you'll have to live with your own head. Minnie went out into the yard. Folding her arms across her chest, she strolled down the path, pondering her mother's words. She said all the right things, all the right things. She sat down on the ground, put her face in the sun and closed her eyes, warming herself. Minnie hears the neighbors talking in the courtyard. Minnie listened, joyful voices sounded, and then feet rattled on the porch, people came in the house. She wondered who had arrived. She stood up as if she had to go to the garden and walked along the feather beds that her father put between the beds not to trample them. There's a net through which you can see the yard. Suddenly a guy appeared on the porch. Tall, Anthony's face, just standing on his feet. Minnie looks at him intently, and he goes down and into the street. He came back with 2 bags, and entered the house. Minnie, shouts Sarah, and the girl flinches in surprise. A friend has come to visit to find out what's what, and to be supportive. Let's go to my place, she waves a hand at her little house. Ted brought wine. Sarah, let's have some later. Are you upset or something? Forget about him, showed her friend exactly how, thinking Minnie was suffering for Dwayne. Who's that coming to the Taylors? So it's the Anthony brothers. Kyle, he's the boss in the capital, married, has 2 children, and Perry is the youngest. Don't you remember them? Why did you start visiting them so often? She suddenly squinted. Anthony's got talent, I've seen the pictures. Well, what do you do with wood? Ted has, you know, what talent, she laughed loudly. It's good to have hands, of course, but a man's got to be a man. You know what I mean, she raised her eyebrows up. Minnie was disgusted. She wasn't going to discuss such a thing with anyone, not the way she'd been brought up. Go, Sarah, she urged her friend. Sew together. No, thank you, she said somewhat aloofly and a little angrily. Suit yourself, Sarah didn't ask for it and left. The Taylor's house was noticeably more cheerful. Guests are not all the same. There are uninvited guests and long-awaited ones, but the neighbors had the second one, so Minnie postponed her visit. She didn't get to talk to Anthony until 3 days later. Kyle and his wife had gone away, while Junior and his nephews stayed behind. Minnie went to the store, and there she bumped into her brothers. Anthony didn't like to go far from home, but Perry persuaded her, talked her into it. Hi, Minnie greeted them, moving her gaze from one guy to the other. This is Minnie, William's sister, do you remember, introduced Anthony. Yes, Perry's eyes lit up with understanding. He looked her over from head to toe, noting that the girl had grown up beautiful. And Minnie realized that they looked like 2 peas in a pod, but there was a huge difference between them now. I wanted to tell you something, the girl turned to Anthony while Perry studied her vigorously. Not here. Come whenever you want, you're always welcome. You have guests. What guests? Laughed Anthony. It's my brother and my nephews. They are ours. We're ours, Perry winked. Come, I'll be waiting, too. Minnie was embarrassed and nodded, not sure how to construe the latter's words. I'll go, she said.
Goodbye.
And headed for the store. Over the days, she realized she missed his voice, the look that caressed her skin. She ran the words through her head and didn't know exactly what she wanted to say. But for some reason she decided she absolutely had to say something. May I? She knocked on the window, and her mother invited her into the house neighborly. Seeing Anthony's animation, the work burning in her hands, brought Minnie to life, warmed him up. A mother wanted every child to be happy. Worthy, as no one is worthy. Come on in, Minnie, come on in, her mother fussed, opening the mug cupboard. Let's have some tea. Minnie glanced at her brothers, who were sitting next to her, realizing that it was almost impossible to tell them apart. Here on the street the difference was very striking, but here they were the same. Are you coming to me or to him? Grinned Perry, and Anthony lowered his gaze to his mug. Don't embarrass the girl, his mother slapped his towel, smiling. To Anthony she came. Minnie wanted to leave, that wasn't how the conversation was seen, but she came herself. You can't offend the hostess. So after drinking her tea, she scrambled away. You just got here, her mother didn't understand. Yes, Minnie agreed, I won't be long. I'll walk you out, Anthony understood. His father dismantled the steps, which had served him well for many years, and built a narrow staircase and ramp that allowed Anthony easy access to the house. This allowed him to drive to the workshop when he needed it, without resorting to help. Once outside, Minnie wanted to hide from everyone. She saw Perry watching them from the kitchen as her mother washed mugs. Anthony headed for the barn, and the girl followed him. I came to apologize. You're welcome. Wait, the girl interrupted him. Let me tell you. First of all, I'm ashamed of Dwayne's behavior. I thought I knew him well, but I was deceived. He is an evil man, a bad man, and therefore his words mean nothing. Anthony grinned. Then why talk about them? Minnie stammered, scrolling through what she had said in her head. The apology came out strangely. She nodded in agreement with her interlocutor and continued. Secondly, she bit her lip and paused for a long moment, not knowing how to say it, then sighed, I'm so sorry, but I ruined your present. She looked down at the man, it fell and cracked accidentally. It's only a thing, he replied almost immediately. The main thing is health, the rest can all be fixed. He grinned somehow sadly, sorry, I realized it too late. Their gazes did meet, and Minnie saw so much sadness and pain in one man. He had let his guard down in front of her for the first time, and on an impulse, she wanted to embrace him and jerk to the side, but, remembering her mother's words, stopped abruptly. The ridiculousness of the situation she had put them both in was heating up. Her eyes were running and the girl was visibly nervous. What did you want to do? Anthony questioned her. His voice was so calm and steady. I don't know, Minnie cupped her fingers. And yet? A hug, she said somehow quietly, wishing she could fail on the spot. Why? She looked away, feeling like a silly little girl next to him. No, he wasn't swearing, it was like he was a teacher leading her in questions about feelings and emotions. Give me a hug, he suddenly suggested. Maybe you'll understand something. She looked at him incredulously. I think I'd better go. Why? You wanted to clear something up for yourself, didn't you? I'll go. All right, but do me a favor then, his voice stopped her just inside the door. The request is the same. Give me a hug. Why? The question now came from Minnie's lips. Suddenly I'd understand something. Minnie was uncomfortable, and Anthony saw it. He didn't want to torture the girl. She had brought sunshine into his world, but it wasn't always going to shine on him. He understood it all for himself. But the girl came on her own, she was so pure and airy. One wants to admire such. And now she stood and trembled like an aspen tree in the wind. he believed that she would fall in love with him. He could wait for years, and the choice in the village is small. Everyone was getting to know each other over the internet. "Go home," he said affectionately, and in the same second she snuggled up to him. Feeling the cheek of her hair, the smell of skin with a subtle scent, intoxicating closeness. He couldn't stand it, hugged her tightly himself, leading his palms down her back. A few days ago her lips had burned his skin, leaving a mark on his face, and since then he had longed to experience it again. His brothers arrived, saying something, telling him something, and he's not with them, he's there, where the girl next door has kissed him out of gratitude. She holds him in her arms, and he's not 15, he's an old man, but he wants to call her his own, but he has no right to. If his knees could shake, they would definitely shake. He remembered who he was now, sobered up, the smile disappeared from his face. Pulled the girl away a little, but gently. "You need another," he decided for her. Minnie's eyes are huge, and fear splashes in them. Warmth comes from the man, kindness reeks, but something stops her, and she herself does not understand her feelings. "No one's needed," she shakes her head. "I've had enough, I'll be on my own. Only time can set things right." Nods Anthony in agreement. "Nothing, all life is ahead, with the first unlucky, such one will not be left alone, will line up. Not him, he won't take someone else's place." "I'll go," Minnie whispers faintly, and this time she runs away, and he sits abandoned among the soulless pieces of wood, which until recently seemed to come alive in his hands. A man needs a man. Hanging his head, Anthony looks at his hands, turning them palms up. Which line is responsible for life here? Isn't it the one that was interrupted in the middle and then went sideways? Where does it say anything about happiness, or are there no such signs? Deep lines pierced the skin, furrowed the palms of my hands, sealed my fate. Minnie came out of the barn and bumped into Perry before she could take 2 steps. Sitting on the porch, smoking. The blue smoke rises upward in the gloom, the cigarette light burns in an orange circle. He sees off the girl, who is even more shrunken, and suddenly runs down the steps and is right there. "Where to?" the girl asked fearfully. "I'll lock the front door behind you." The man looked straight into her eyes. He was handsome, confident, tall. A t-shirt tightened around his broad back and handsome body. "Did Anthony hurt you or something?" he inquired, following her. "No," Minnie shook her head quickly, wrapping herself in her sweatshirt, even though it was stuffy outside. "Why'd you run out like you were on fire?" Minnie doubted what to answer. Everything went wrong. Thank you for watching. We'll tell you the end of this story in our next video. Be sure to watch it to find out Minnie's solution.
An amazing story, isn't it? Thank you for listening till the end. I sincerely hope that you truly enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and rate this video. See you in the comments and in